Greetings, everyone. Welcome to the May Restoration Webinar Series, Seeds to Success. My name is Eric Winford. I'm a rangeland ecologist with the University of Idaho, based in Boise. My co-host is Lauren King, extension educator with University of Idaho in Benewah County. And today we have Wes Keller with us with the Nez Perce Tribe Fisheries, who's going to talk about a Zena Creek restoration project. So before we turn it over to Wes, I just wanted to let everyone know that this is a monthly webinar series. It's the fourth Thursday of the month. We have another one planned for June. The speaker's still confirming yet, but hopefully I'll get confirmation soon about that speaker. But if you joined our email list, we'll send out an email update on that. We'll also send out email updates with the webinar recording, as well as all the other webinars. So our YouTube playlist, I'll put that in the chat, um, is available, and we've had a number of webinars there from in the past year. So please check that out and feel free to look at those. If you have a question during the presentation, please just put that in the Q&A or the chat, and we'll get to it at the end of the presentation. Okay, I think with that, Wes, I'll turn it over to you, and thanks for being here with us today.
Yeah, thanks, Eric and Lauren, for organizing, and thanks everyone for joining. I'll just give a little background. My name is Wes Keller. I work for the Nez Perce Tribe Watershed Division. We do a lot of habitat restoration projects, and on the next slide, I'll kind of show you my project area. But I've worked for the Nez Perce Tribe for the last 21 years, based out of the McCall office. And yeah, with that, I'm going to talk today to you about the Zena Creek Fish Passage Project. This is a partnership project. The tribe was able to secure the grant funding through the Pacific Coast Salmon Recovery Fund and Fish and Wildlife, Fish Passage Grant. And we're working on this project with Trout Unlimited and the owners of the Zena Creek Ranch. And so I'll give a little more background on that, but we'll kind of jump in here. So the first thing I wanted to do is just give some folks a quick one background slide on the work the Nez Perce tribe does and why they do it and where they do it as well. And so sometimes maps can be kind of busy, but so let me first just kind of read through this mission. The Nez Perce tribe is really trying to restore and protect aquatic ecosystems throughout the Nez Perce tribe country. This work has its roots in exercising tribal sovereignty and the protection of rights reserved on the Nez Perce Tribe Treaty of 1855. With the United States federal government, we really look to do watershed level, ridgetop to ridgetop type work. So let me just kind of show you this map and slowly kind of walk you through it. The area in red is the Nez Perce Tribe ceded territory, and this is the historic use land area of the Nez Perce Tribe. As you guys know, this boundary is somewhat realistic, but somewhat not. This boundary was created by the Idaho Indian Claims Commission back in 1948, and obviously there's not straight lines on where the Nez Perce lived and went to. The Nez Perce would travel to the coast to trade with the coastal tribes. They'd head over to Montana to buffalo hunt, but that red boundary really kind of denotes where the tribe is actively doing restoration. The crosshatch you see here is Forest Service ground. And so you can see a lot of the work we're doing is taking place on federal Forest Service ground, and then some of it's on private. I work in the South Fork salmon and the Big Creek and the Little Salmon watersheds, which you can see, hopefully you can see my pointer. The reservation boundary, obviously the 1855 boundary was what the Nez Perce tribe considered the real treaty with the federal government. And then the blue boundary you see is the 1863 reservation boundary. That's often called the steel boundary that the tribe was basically forced to sign. And so, yeah, this area that we work, that crosshatch, that's where there's numerous different watershed departments doing work through that tribe's traditional lands. So I'm going to kind of get specific today and just talk to you about one project. And this is the Zena Creek project. This is a dam removal project, and so I'm going to walk you through this map right here as well. You can see the Zena Creek Dam is this red dot up on Zena Creek. Zena Creek feeds into the Cisesh River, and if you guys don't know where that is, it kind of feeds into the South Fork Salmon. It's about maybe 17 miles east of McCall, Idaho. So the Cisesh River is a really special river. This river's never been supplemented with hatchery fish. Has amazing habitat, really good returns, relative, right, to other systems. And Zena Creek it's a just a neat little stream, really cold, clean water. And I'll talk a little bit more about the history of the dam, but that's where it's located on that red dot. There is a small chunk of private property, this crosshatch right here. This is the Zena Creek Ranch, and I'll talk a little bit about the history of that as well in the next slides. As you can see, the crosshatch, this is steelhead critical habitat. The little dotted line is bull trout, and all these streams are Chinook critical habitat as well. And you can see further upstream, it forks into the West Fork of Zena and the East Fork of Zena, just to kind of orient yourself there. So a little history, the Zena Creek Dam went in 1962, and it's kind of an interesting story. If you guys know where the Deadwood Reservoir, that is over not far out of Boise, it's kind of heading up on the South Fork of the Payette, the headwaters of that. When they removed the hydroelectric part of the dam, this landowner that owns Zena Creek Ranch was able to get this massive hydroelectric generator. So we brought it back to his logging camp, and he was a pretty resourceful guy. But he made this basically this dam impoundment, and the idea behind it was to build head pressure, and he would take this head pressure down to that hydroelectric system. And like I said, this thing could have powered literally maybe the entire town of Yellow Pine or a smaller town. It was way overkill. So they had to get a lot of head pressure. So the dam was impounded with an earthen dam. But it's been impacting fish movement for the last 63 years. And so we had worked with the original landowner, and he was not ready to remove this dam. And we were really kind of trying to tighten the screws on the Payette National Forest, saying, come on, there's a lot of good habitat upstream. So when he sold this property, we were excited. The new landowners that purchased it, the Zena Creek landowners, recognized that this was not an ideal situation, and that they were going to revamp the hydroelectric system to be much smaller, much more practical, and to provide fish passage for all life stages. So it's been great working with them. I'm going to give you guys kind of an aerial view of what it looks like right now. Again, this is the flow is moving through this direction. A severely oversteep and earthen dam. A lot of sediment gets caught in here. The landowner for years was taking that sediment out, scooping it out, because this is all in the Idaho batholith. It's real decomposing kind of granitic soils. So a constant process of scooping sediment out of here, putting the sediment on the areas here. They were taking it elsewhere to try to fill low spots, but during high water, and I'll show some folks some pictures in the next slide, fish were able to get over this at certain times a year, but at low flows, this was pretty much impassable to all life stages. So this is some other images kind of looking at it. This is looking, the upend stream and the impoundment, again, just really filled in with sediment. This is the outflow on the image to the right. You can see they use really large rock. There's about a 12.6% slope, so fish have a really hard time getting over it. Lower left picture here, you can kind of see this is the direction of the flow. So we would constantly see fish. This is the outflow at the bottom of that dam, and we'd see fish, juvenile salmonids, constantly trying to get up this during the warmer summer months, trying to access that cold, clean water, and not being able to. So let me just kind of touch a little more on the fish. In Zena Creek itself, we have Chinook salmon, we have B-run steelhead, and we have bull trout. All three of these fish are listed as under the ESA as threatened. And so we've been collecting data in Zena Creek for a lot of years, trying to really kind of characterize where these fish are, what's the, during certain windows when they can get over that hydro system, the earthen dam, how far up are they going? And I'll show a slide on that a little later. But last year we did some snorkeling because we knew we were going to remove this dam. And it was, it was good to see there's Chinook salmon just below the dam trying to get upstream. And so we were really surprised that there were juvenile fish that were able to get above the dam. It must be this real small window where it's high enough, but not so high that they can't handle the hydraulics. But surprised they were able to get over there. And there was a large 200 millimeter bull trout just above the dam as well. So we've done a lot of eDNA. Do you guys, hopefully folks know what that is. If you don't, it's a really fascinating technology. You basically take a filter and you filter 5 liters of water through a pump. And you take that filter and send it in, and you can determine where fish are, if you have presence or absence of fish. So it's fairly accurate. It's almost like a crime scene. Like when you get a positive hit, that tells you that you had, let's say, a steelhead there. If that steelhead, if they are removed from the system, it only takes a small amount of time before that eDNA is removed from the system. So we went in and we were able to collect a lot of data. Let me kind of show you this map and just kind of walk you through. But here's the dam right here. We know that we have Chinook using up to the dam and slightly above the dam. Bull trout have been detected a little bit higher up. And then we know we have steelhead going way up the west fork of Zena Creek. And then we know we have west slope and steelhead using the east fork of Zena Creek. So we know during that small window, these fish can utilize this habitat and they like this habitat. We took some samples above this area and we didn't get hits. We've also done snorkeling and e-shocking throughout here, so we know where the fish. We have a good idea where these fish are, but they're currently using about 4.36 miles of Zena at certain times a year, and the rest of the year they're not able to access above that. So what are the project benefits? Why are we doing this and what do we hope to get out of it? We really want to open, remove this dam to open 4.36 miles of habitat needed for these ESA listed fish. I imagine there'll be some adult steelhead spawning upstream, but a lot of it's going to be the juvenile fish when it gets warmer in the summer months. The bull trout, the steelhead, and Chinook like to pour in and use as cold water habitat. So we put out some thermographs and we were seeing it's when the Sea Sesh is a fairly cold river, which is but the Zena Creek was even 4 to 6 C, which is really significantly lower than the Sea Sesh. So again, during those warm summer months, and we start thinking about climate change, how important these cold water little side refugia is for these fish to access, and just that varied habitat, letting them being able to move to different areas when they need to. So the current channel slope, like I mentioned, is 12.6%. We will reduce that to 3.2% so that all life stages can pass it at high water and low water. I'll have some more slides, but we'll talk about, we're going to enhance the floodplains with large woody debris and riparian plantings, and I'll kind of show just like an image here in the next slide. So this top image is the current conditions right here. Zena Creek is flowing through right here. We have this pinch point. They brought in that earthen material to really kind of create that earthen dam. The existing rock spillways right here. All of that will be removed, and we'll be doing a series of boulder complex, boulders, riffle runs, trying to mimic the upstream and downstream areas. We're going to be using a lot of large woody debris to try to, keep this stream as much as we'd like it to be able to move like a normal stream would. We kind of have to pin it in here just so we don't put all this time and energy into it and have it jump into a different area. So it'll be armored with bank deflectors, some wood, and floodplain wood and things like that. Just for folks who have done these kind of projects before, you know you have to do this work in the dry. So this is just a quick schematic showing that at some point we'll have to put a coffer dam in. The entire Zena Creek will be put into a flexible pipe. We'll have a downstream one so that we're working in areas that don't have fish. We'll have to de-water this area, and I'll talk about that fish salvage in another slide. We'll be tagging some of these fish to try to get a better understanding how they're able to move back up through the system. But just kind of a schematic and whether or not this is exactly how it works out. It will be, either a plastic line ditch or culvert. And so we'll have that entire stream flow work through here. Once we have it in the dry, we'll rebuild the channel. And then we'll slowly pump down so we can salvage as many fish as we can that are residing in this pond. So when you're designing something, you really got to understand the hydrology. When you're designing a river channel, you have to kind of take into consideration what you're dealing with. So Zena Creek drains about 10.7 square miles. Spring runoff, the annual exceedance probability, the 1% is about 231 CFS, so it can get big. The 50% is about 83 CFS, and low flow or base flow is anywhere from 8 to 5 CFS. So we had to really build this considering that we could have really high flows and that we still need to pass fish at really low flows. And to make things even more interesting, the landowners, the Zena Creek landowners, they had a 7 CFS water right, which was the entire stream. They were really generous and banked 5 CFS. And then they'll have a new, more refined hydroelectric plant that only uses 2 CFS, which is still a huge amount of water. I actually think when they really get down to the nuts and bolts, they'll be using more like 0.2 CFS, but they have a water right for that 2 CFS. So we just have to kind of take all that into consideration. When we know the low flows is potentially 7 CFS, they're going to take 2. We got to make sure the design is encompassing fish passage at that 5 CFS point. And so that's some of the things we kind of took into the designs. Just some cross sections just to kind of give you an idea. As the flow will be adding a lot of large rocks, creating pool structures, resting pools for the fish. It all flows. Again, this is just a kind of a cross section. We'll also be putting large woody debris placement. And so this is, again, just a kind of a cross section. Again, really nice having the Zena Creek area. There's a lot of large standing wood. So we'll be able to harvest wood right from the site. We try to keep root wads and all. The Forest Service, who's also a partner on this project, conducted some surveys. There's plenty of wood available on the site. Again, we'll use that wood for anchoring structures similar to this. This is just kind of an image to give an idea. And then again, the bank deflectors will be using that wood. And I'll show you the riparian plantings in the next slide. We'll be doing heavy planting on here. There'll be new disturbance. A lot of, I kind of mentioned earlier, this crosshatch up here, so much of what was taken out of the pond year after year after year was deposited up in these areas. And so what we'll do is remove that fill and again, take it to a proper repository where it can be used on other projects by the Forest Service or county, but we'll get it out of the floodplain so it's not continuing on the sedimentation of Zena Creek and the C-Sesh and the South Fork. But these green lines, just to note, we'll be doing a lot of trench planting. We were able to get an EPA grant and secure quite a bit of plant funding. It's not just for this project, but for other projects throughout the project area. So this will be planted heavily with native vegetation. And that fill will be removed from the site. And again, trying to reduce our footprint and fuel costs, gathering, hopefully using boulders from that embankment as much the best we can, and the wood from the site so we don't have to be driving far and having a large carbon footprint in this process. So I think everyone knows whenever you have a project, you have to get environmental compliance. And I won't talk super long on this, but I just kind of wanted to show you the compliance that we had to get for this. I always recommend people start early on this. It can take a while. The Forest Service helped out. They did a categorical exclusion through the NEPA project that's already complete. Forest Service helped out by doing the Section 7. This is the consultation with NOAA and the Fish and Wildlife Service, since we have ESA listed fish species. The historic 106, making sure there's not artifacts in the area, has been complete. And the Army Corps 404 and 401 permits have been secured as well. So we should be all set and ready to go on this project. One thing that kind of threw a wrench in it that we didn't consider is because it was a dam, you also had to have the FERC, the federal, I can't even probably remember the acronym, Federal Energy Regulation Commission, something along those lines. But anytime you have a dam, you have to involve FERC. And the landowner took that on, which was great. And we just got that through recently. So, like I said, really, we'll look through everything you think you need and double check, because you don't need a surprise at the last minute. So the project timeline, we were able to secure a contractor already, and we'll visit the site in June, and we'll be doing mobilization and in-water work, in probably late August, and then do some planting in later October. So this will be a 1-year project, and just kind of knock this out. One of the things we did too is we built in some additional funds for extra hours, and I recommend anyone who's doing a project always just build in some extra hours. It's something I've learned over the years, that you can't ask someone and you have to go back and do a contract mod, and it gets complicated. So we just built in some extra hours. We wanted just to kind of remove the remnants of the old dam. And so we figured, well, do it once while we have the stream to watered. Let's get it out of there, just kind of remove some of that legacy infrastructure. There was also, here's the dam right here. There's also an old road that was probably part of an old logging road. While we have the contractor on site, we're going to decommission that road. It's been kind of reeling and going into Zena Creek and causing sedimentation issues. So it's a small road, and we just kind of figured, hey, while we have the contractor on there, let's just decommission that road and get it off the landscape, so it's gone forever and not causing issues. So how do we plan to monitor, if you spend this money of removing a dam, like did you get more fish? Were fish able to pass over it? So what we're going to be doing is some intensive snorkel surveys prior to the dam removal. In hindsight, I wish we'd probably done about 5 years of these snorkel surveys to have better data, but hindsight's always 2020. We will pit tag about when we do the dewater of the, to work in the dry, and we have that impounded pond. We got permission to pit tag about 200 fish, and hopefully you guys know what pit tags are. It's about the size of a grain of rice, and it gets inserted into the fish's internal cavity, and it basically can stay with the fish until they're adults. And when they go over an array, it scans them almost like think of like you're at the grocery store scanning a product, and it tells you when you were to tag that fish, who tagged that fish. So we'll be able to see, we'll put in a small array in the fall, and we'll release those fish downstream, and it'll be really interesting to see, if those fish again move upstream, and just to kind of confirm that they are able to pass over the new river system that we built in there. We'll just do some standard before and after drone imagery. We'll have a camera up during construction just to kind of capture all of that. We'll continue the water temperature monitoring. And then we'll do riparian plant survivaling. So not a super in-depth monitoring plan. We know when you remove something like a dam, you're gonna allow fish to move upstream, but we'll just do that level of monitoring to make sure everything's working like we hoped. So some lessons learned, and I hope that I can pass this on to folks. And I think the first one's no surprise. always building contingency funds and time. And I'll give the example. We had obtained the Fish and Wildlife Service grant. I was all excited. Let's get going. And then, the Forest Service was going to maybe do this in house, and I think they kind of realized it might be a more complex project than they thought. And then the funding that we had estimated was vastly not enough. So we had to go ask the Pacific Coast Salmon Recovery Fund for some additional funds. And at first I was just so ready to get this project moving. But in hindsight, it was really nice that we had more time. I think we came up with a better project and had more time to get all the other the required uh, things that just the environmental clearance that need to be done completed. And having more time allowed for more conversations. So sometimes, like I said, build in more time and more funds than you think. We partnered with other agencies. The tribe sometimes does projects solely on their own, but we worked with Trout Unlimited just because we haven't worked with them and wanted to build that kind of relationship in this area. And then working with the Forest Service, we've been partnering with them for years, the Payette National Forest and the Boise National Forest. So their skill sets and their, having some outside engineering oversight and bouncing ideas off of, I think you always get a better product. With that said, when you bring in more agencies, you get more feedback, and sometimes you got to work through that. So it's always interesting. I think there's a fine line of bringing agencies in that bring unique skill sets, and then maybe not so many that it gets too complicated. And again, I can't stress enough how important it is to collect preliminary data to help. Having that fishery data really helped us obtain the grants. Having that good understanding of where the fish are, how much habitat we're actually opening up, so that when I was conveying that to the Pacific Coast Salmon Recovery Fund, they had buy-in. And same with the landowners, establishing good relationships so that you have that buy-in from the landowner too. And I can, just the next point, there's times we all have projects that are a good project and that will have meaningful results. And sometimes you just don't have that private landowner that's ready. So we really had to, when that landowner sold the property, and we had new ones in, we were ready to roll, and we could work with that landowner and kind of be patient with them and just make sure that they were on board. But again, don't give up on a project just because you got to know. If someone tells you no, sometimes you have to wait that person out. Sometimes a lot of projects you're going to get a no right off the bat, and it's just I can only say be persistent, take your time, and sometimes you just have to wait people out. And thirdly, projects are always more complex than they seem. Just removing an earthen dam sounds so easy, but now you have to hook up, get rid of that existing hydroelectric dam. The landowners have to get a new one in. There was all sorts of regulatory hoops and things like that, and that's no surprise. Anyone that's at a project, anyone that's fixed a kitchen sink knows it's going to get more complex than you originally thought. So that's some of the takeaways I would hope folks just, I could pass on to you, and just lessons learned from this project alone. And so what I'll do is this is the last slide here, you guys. This is the upstream habitat, and it's absolutely beautiful habitat. We have cold, clean water. We have spawning gravels. We have healthy riparian ecosystem. So I'm really excited to welcome these fish back to this upstream habitat that they've been blocked from in the last, the low water periods where they really need to access it. So with that, I can take any questions, and we can just have dialogue on this project or anything else that I covered.
Yeah, Wes, thanks so much for sharing all this. This is really, really cool project. And we'll have to have you back once it's implemented so we can see how it looks. Um, and
Just so you guys know, the Zena Creek Ranch, they've been working closely with Boise State. The goal of the new ranch owners, it used to be an old logging ranch, and now they're trying to make it a science school. And so, Boise State's been sending quite a few folks up to the ranch to help out with kind of the planning of their hydroelectric and their solar infrastructure. And they've been teaching science classes out there. So just making you and Lauren aware of that. If you ever wanted to form that partnership with these folks and see it in person.
Cool. Yeah, that sounds great. Yeah, I think if anyone out there has questions, just drop them in the chat or the Q&A and we'll read them out here. Um, Couple starting off with you, so it was a hydroelectric and it still is a hydroelectric and but there's not a dam, or is there a dam kind of pushing some water into that hydroelectric facility?
Yeah, so there is still, I'll go back just that image to kind of, there still is a hydroelectric facility on there. This hydroelectric facility, though, was so complicated. So the dam is still, the earthen dam is still in place, and the water goes through this pipe and it connects to the system. And they're still using that for their sprinkler, but the hydraulic system they had, I mean, it was such an impressive thing to see. The previous landowner was really handy. He would make parts from scratch and be doing, just fixing this nonstop. The new landowners came and saw, oh my God, like the leather belt for the hydroelectric dam comes from one place in France and no one's making this stuff anymore. And it was so complicated that they walked away from it. And they'll use some of the infrastructure for their new one, but the new ones are so much more, they're simple, they're easy, they use so much less water that they kind of abandon the original one and they're moving towards their new one.
Awesome. Okay. Okay. So it didn't take too much to talk them into doing that replacement. They sounded like they wanted to do that already.
We got really lucky. The owners are, one of them is a fishery biologist. And so, I mean, it doesn't get any easier than that. Conveying the need for removing this made sense to all the owners. And like I said, I've done a lot of projects on private land, and this, in some ways, was the easiest one to ever to convince the landowners that this was the right thing to do.
Nice. Okay. A question about the riparian plantings that you're doing. What can you give some more detail about that, or what
Sure.
type of plantings? Is it seeds? Is it willow stakes? And kind of how did you have those? Are you gathering those on site, or are you doing propagation? And
Yeah, we do propagation on certain projects. We try to get, whenever we can, we try to get local stock and seed. We hand it off to the nursery. The nursery grows for us. We try to use as large a stock as possible. Um, Seed is great, and this area we'll have to really evaluate. We'll see at the end if we can let natural recovery happen. We'll do that. We've been up to the site. There is some weeds up at the site. We've been spraying it for the last 3 years in preparation for the ground disturbance, trying to, so we don't have any kind of problem with weeds. The native stock was taken down. It's been grown. So a lot of it's in 5 gallon. We'll have the contractor, some of it will be just a trench, which makes it so easy when you have equipment in there and you can just put willows, red osier dogwood, hawthorn, alder. The upland species will be rose, currant. I should have brought the whole list up here, but we just went up to the site and tried to really make sure we're putting back in there what's already there. And then, that when you have those trench plantings, it's really nice. You can just put those 5 gallon pots in there, backfill behind it, and you have a jump start. You can grow from seed, but my experience has been it takes a while. And willow stakes are great for certain areas. I know people have had really good luck, but again, you're the growing season up here because it's cold, long winters. It just takes so long. We try to accelerate with the nursery growing larger stock for us.
that's good to hear. Yeah, we've had a lot of presentations about seeding and how do we do this correctly because there's a lot of dead willow stakes out there from projects. So using the sounds like you've using that nursery grown stock up to 5 gallon containers. That sounds like it's gonna do well for you.
Are you
And
guys fencing that at all, or are you just crossing
no, we'll
fingers?
be really lucky. There's no need to fence. There's no grazing right there, which is nice. And there's so much habitat that the elk and deer will likely come in. We've had other areas down on the Little Salmon where we work where it's just kind of mandatory fencing. But because the habitat is so healthy up here, they'll nip and graze a little bit, but it's not like the only food source in town. And on the Little Salmon, which is a lot more denuded where we work, we have to do deer exclusion fencing, livestock fencing, all of that, and just to keep things, get them established. And usually, once things get above browse height, you can remove that fence and let things in. But yeah, this should be we should have pretty good growth here and without too much browse.
That's always reassuring to hear because deer and elk like to mutilate things.
They do. No, we've had that same experience where a big buck will come and just do a rub on every single one and knock it down. Just things you didn't think of. And hopefully we'll see. We don't have beaver right up in this system right now, but we've had that happen too, where the beaver have said thank you and took everything really at once and quickly. So, I think you have to have adaptive management. If we came in here and we were seeing that what we assumed was wrong, then we're pretty adept at getting some fence in pretty quick if need be.
That pit tagging, the monitoring. Let's talk about that for a second because I
Sure.
um, made me really happy to see the monitoring plan. Big proponent of monitoring and looking at it. Um, a couple of questions about it. That do you have adaptive management plans in place based upon the monitoring, or are you kind of like gonna see what happens and then make a plan up? And just kind of thinking about how much have you planned out in advance are you going to do with that monitoring and its response when you actually implement?
Yeah, so we've kind of thought through it. We worked together with our research division. The snorkel surveys, the good thing is the Forest Service and the Fish and Game. This is a site that we do have some preliminary, some data for some earlier years. It wasn't specific to that. So we'll work with Fish and Game and we'll jump in on those snorkel surveys prior to the dam. The pit tagging, we got what we could. We'll see. I'm assuming we're going to have 1 to 200 fish. It'll be interesting. It'll probably be a mix of probably smaller numbers of Chinook, but a lot of steelhead and a lot of cutthroat and bull trout. And so we got permits through the reg agencies to be able to tag those fish. The new pit tag arrays are super fascinating. They're making these small ring pit tag arrays. We all know how, for folks that have ever seen them, sometimes they go all the way across the river. They used to be really complicated. These ones are almost like mobile. You attach them into the substrate. They weigh a lot. And as the fish go over, they have a really nice read range. And the idea is to be, I don't think I would love to say we'd love to do a long-term 5 year study, but we just, we can't do that everywhere. So we do that on certain projects. But we'll get one season's worth of data on this one just to make ensure that fish are able to move upstream. And then a lot of it, again, is just drone imagery, photo imagery, water temperature, and the riparian plants will do transects, make sure that if something's not surviving well, you don't go back and just keep replanting the same thing. Find out what's working there, really try to match it to the natural vegetation. So you have it looking as close to upstream and downstream as you can.
Yeah, that sounds good. All right. Any other questions from the audience? Just throw them in the chat or the message box in the Q&A. But we will be this is recorded, and so we'll be posting this up on the YouTube channel. As you exit the webinar, that we do have a couple of questions about future webinars. So if you have ideas for future webinars or topics, please do let us know and we'll see if we can find someone to talk about it. I guess that's a wrapping up. Anything kind of last you'd like to say, Wes, or any other thing you want to hit on?
No, thanks for hosting this webinar. I think this is a great, really great service. You know, we're all doing the best we can to restore landscapes, and I think we need to learn from one another. Feel free to reach out to Eric or Lauren if you have specific questions or you need to want to talk further about a project that you're working on that might be similar to this. I'm always available to be, just shoot me an email and we can touch base. And other than that, I imagine most of the folks are on here because they're interested in restoration, and I just say continue the fight. There's a lot of work to be done in restoring landscapes that have been altered, and so yeah, I'm glad to see folks on here, and hopefully we can all learn from one another. And I'll have to get that link as well, Eric, and join some of the future ones that you guys have.
Yeah, I hope we're going to have someone next month in June from Trout Unlimited talking about a Blackfoot River restoration project actually over in eastern Idaho.
Cool.
So I'll share that when that comes out and let you know about it. So there's some really cool projects going on around the state.
Great. Well, thanks, Eric. Thanks, Lauren, and thanks everyone for joining. And like I said, reach out to Eric if you do need my contact information. And with that,
Yeah, thank you so much, Wes.
we'll jump off.
Well, take care.
All
Bye
right.
now.
Bye.